Hi, my name is Jennifer Kent and I'm the director of The Babadook. I'll start again. I was going to do an evil laugh, but... Hi, my name's Jennifer Kent. I'm the writer, director of The Babadook and The Nightingale, and I'm here today to talk about how in my films I tend to start with one idea that informs everything about the film. So whether it be production design or sound design to aspect ratio to camera and lighting, all these things are governed by one central overarching idea. I guess then the next question is, what is the central idea and where does it come from? Who the hell knows? I don't know. It's not like I have one bolt out of the blue and suddenly the idea is perfectly formed. Things will filter through as I'm going about my day, and then I'll keep thinking on an idea, and then eventually it will form enough that I know what it is and I want to spend the next few years of my life committing to that idea. The Babadook and The Nightingale both contain central ideas that I am really passionate about. With The Babadook, I was always quite fascinated by people who could suppress really dark, deep, painful experiences. And I wanted to explore the idea that perhaps pushing down on those terrible experiences is harder than facing them. And with The Nightingale, I was feeling a distinct lack of empathy in the world. I wanted to look at the importance of empathy and love and compassion in very dark times. And I have to say at this point, this is not like a masterclass in how to develop a screenplay or a film. This is just my way. And in fact, it can change from film to film. So once I've developed the script to a point that I'm happy with, the next thing I probably want to do is start thinking about actors. I like to really be with my actors and be there in a period of rehearsal. But I never look at the script and get the actors to rehearse the lines, because then by the time you get to the shoot, everything's completely flat and dead. So I'll pull out games and improvisations and things that work for each particular actor.
Sir, my letter of recommendation, sir, it's due 3 months ago now.
This is a scene from The Nightingale between Claire and her master. It was carefully plotted to embody the very difficult relationship between abuser and victim. This is one of those times where I worked with both actors to create a very specific dynamic. And I used some abstract physical exercises to get them to connect, just using their hands. A certain signal that denoted harassment, another one that represented sexual assault, and another one that represented rape. And what that did was it gave them a pre-existing relationship. It was only through that trust and respect that Sam could be so despicable towards Aisling's character.
Ungrateful!
Once we get on set, I don't really like to stop and start that much. It really pisses the first AD off, but I like to allow the actor to work into a scene. So we might do rolling takes, they might last 20, 30 minutes. It's all focused on helping the actor to truly give themselves over to the performance.
You don't know how many times I wished it was you, not him, that died.
I just want you to be happy.
I just want you to be happy.
In this particular scene, if I actually put Noah in that situation where Essie was saying those things to him, that would be child abuse.
I just want to smash your head against a brick wall until your brains pop out.
So we shot these scenes separately. Essie was acting to a person on their knees, an adult.
6 years old and you're still wetting yourself.
Noah was acting to Essie on that trolley that she was on, with me sitting on there too. And he knew that we were just playing games. He really loved his Lego. So Essie was saying things like, I'm going to take all your Lego and I'm going to shove it in a bag and pour cement in it and throw it into the river. And he was furious about that. There were little, tricks that we were able to use to get him to this space of fear and then fury. Not the Lego! Locations are also another thing that's going to really inform the idea in one way or another. So with The Babadook, it's a film almost entirely of interiors, and with The Nightingale, it's the opposite. It's set largely in alpine wilderness. In each film, I think the location becomes a character that serves this central idea I've got running through my head. In the Babadook, we shot in a studio, so we could move walls, make rooms bigger, smaller. We could play with perspective and space. It morphed and changed as she became more and more influenced by the Babadook. In the Nightingale, we had over 160 locations. The nature initially started out for Claire as very frightening and foreign, and as we went through the film and she changed, she developed a different relationship to her surroundings. So the landscape changed and shifted according to what she was going through. I'm always aware of how the surroundings can influence my lead character. Here's a classic example of landscape being character. We wanted to shoot in Tasmania, and it made it very difficult. Actually, it was the most difficult choice, but the best choice visually. But you know, I think you can't cheat these things. The other option was to shoot closer to town, but that would mean CGIing out a kiosk and a car park, and there really was nothing in the distance on those shots. So it was very important to the film, especially from the Aboriginal perspective, to film in Tasmania, because these things played out on this soil. And so in order to really be honouring Tasmanian Aboriginal people, we needed to film in the environment where all this happened. We enlisted the collaboration of a senior Tasmanian Aboriginal elder, and we made the decision as we went along where was most appropriate to shoot each particular scene in collaboration with the Aboriginal people. Later in the film, Billy and Claire's characters have grown from this mutual hatred and racism to beginning to see each other as human beings. There's a genuine need for Billy anyway to try and understand Claire. It again ties into this connection with empathy. You know, is it possible to empathise with someone so different? And is it possible to have empathy in very, very difficult times? Lighting is something also really important to supporting an overall idea. And with the Babadook and the Nightingale, the lighting states could not have been more different. So Babadook is obviously an interior film, and we wanted a heightened quality. So there was a high contrast, directional light that created lots of shadows and got more surreal and more heightened as we went along. The lighting falls off into nothingness and everything's focused on her energy. Whereas with the Nightingale, it was more a matter of dealing with natural light. I wanted to create this overcast world. So there it was more about protecting our frame from sunlight. And then when we were inside, we were using candlelight.
She likes you, Wallace.
So I am a freak for sound. I love sound. It really is something that obviously strengthens your central idea. It immerses you in the world of the character. I only use music when sound can no longer tell the story. This is one of these examples where sound starts to blend into musical strains. So music and sound are working together to create the horror.
What did you say?
I said you're not my mother!
And then at the moment where he throws the firecrackers, the sound then bursts into music. So it's a blend. It's not like you have sound and then music takes over. They're working together. I see The Nightingale as a war film. So I looked for other war films that inspired me, and the only one that really hit the mark was a Russian film by Elem Klimov called Come and See. For my money, the only truly anti-war film ever made. And the sound design there is genius.
1, 2, 3.
It's very immersive, it's very subjective. It adds to the horror of his experience of war. The sound starts to make us feel uneasy. We're starting to hear the young boy's hearing become affected through this sequence. We are still in his point of view. I mean, I could watch the whole thing. Okay, I'd sit here for like 2 hours. There's so many other elements that go to serve the central idea, and I think they can probably all be put into the heading of visuals. So costume design, production design will impact the idea. In the Babadook, we chose to shoot CinemaScope because there's a lot of fear in the empty frame. I really insisted on the Babadook himself being shot in camera because I think the brain responds differently when you're seeing something play out in camera. It's something more frightening about seeing something that's not CGI'd, that's actually real.
Touch my son again, I'll fucking kill you!
We built this scarecrow-looking Babadook, and then when he collapses, there's crew, pulling wires and strings. What it gave Essie and Noah as actors was this feeling like they knew what would be in the final product. They weren't having to imagine things in front of a blue screen. In the Nightingale, we chose a more narrow, higher aspect ratio, which was all about capturing those really beautiful, tall trees and the depth of the forest. Colour is also really important. In the Babadook, I wanted a really reduced colour palette, so blacks through to whites, blue, some pinks, burgundies, that was it. Drove my production designer mad trying to achieve this effect. So I'm obviously very focused on actors, but I feel equally focused on camera. My job is to move an audience in some direction, and I think camera has a lot more to do with that than some people realise. So if it needs to feel cold and sparse and bare, I might do really sort of locked off wide shots. I used a lot of that in the Babadook. As the film went along, she would drift off to the side, and so we had a lot of negative space, which makes an audience, whether they're aware of it or not, start to feel uneasy. I wanted it to feel like a pair of hands gently placed on the audience's neck, growing tighter and tighter and tighter until they felt they couldn't breathe. And the camera, amongst other things, was a way to achieve that. So this is the one and only Babadook POV. I wanted us to see her seeing it. This shot makes me laugh because the camera was on a rope and we just hoiked it down the stairs, which is probably not good for insurance, but that's how we got that shot. With the Nightingale, my DP and I talked a lot about how to shoot this very long scene where Claire's life is annihilated, and we needed to get the emotion, the right emotion for the scene. Initially, the shots would be very locked off, stark, cold, to give this sense of anxiety. And then there's a certain point in the scene where two male characters come to butt heads, and then very gradually we start to introduce handheld work. And then as the tension builds and builds and becomes more chaotic, then the handheld work becomes more visceral and alive and energetic. And then it builds and builds and builds to one particular point. I flipped her upside down in camera, and then everything goes back on sticks. The effect for me emotionally was like the air being sucked out of the room and her life being over. I felt an enormous responsibility to stay within the skin of that female character. I think audiences have become very anaesthetized to violence on screen, and it's something I find disturbing. I looked at all scenes of sexual violence that I could find, and one common thread I found was how objective they were. They've been often told from the male gaze. We were removed from, usually a woman, usually removed from her experience. People say, oh, these scenes are so shocking and disturbing. Of course they are, and we need to feel that. I think when we become so removed from violence on screen, this is a very irresponsible thing. So I wanted to put us right within the frame with that person experiencing the loss of everything they hold dear. All right, This is the way I've created 2 films. I don't know if it's going to be the way I work on the next one. I think what's more important than that is to have a really strong point of view that comes from your very being. I think there is so much content out there now. The word freaks me out. And I think we are perhaps in danger of losing a strong, unique, individual point of view. Spend time looking to find your own way of processing the world, what you want to say, and make it count, make it meaningful, and make it something that's going to impact your audience and move them in some direction. That's the end of this Vanity Fair profile on me, Jennifer Kent. Famous director.